bring up David Porter now from EPRI. He's Senior Director of Electrification and Sustainable Energy Strategy with over 30 years of experience, within the industry, Florida Power and Duke Energy, and now at EPRI facilitating partnerships between utilities and the energy industry and government. And I think that's a really nice kind of background, hopefully, to bring interesting perspectives from a holistic point of view. So we look forward to a presentation from you and then some more Q&A.
Okay.
So please, welcome.
Thanks, Richie. Larry, I know you didn't plan on having to be this close to me sitting on the front row today, so I apologize. Before I get started, I'd like to recognize a few of my EPRI colleagues that are here today. Thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you. That are here. So there's about a handful of us here. If you have questions in some other areas, Eric Smith right here, who's part of our climate group. Behind him, Justin Martin, who's in our integrated grid and energy systems group. And on this side, Aaron Kay, who's with our sustainability work, and Heidi Scarth, who's also in our climate group. So we covered a lot of areas with folks that are here today. So please mingle with them in the breaks, and they can answer a lot of questions that you might have. And Larry Beckedahl is their backup. He can answer a lot of questions too. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I want to spend a bit of time talking with you about the future energy system, what it looks like, and with three key drivers as a part of that. One, decarbonization. Two, resilience. And three, the digital transformation. Nothing new there, but all underpinned by affordability, reliability, and a clean energy future. These are all things that you've heard from some of the other speakers, and so hopefully we can tie a few things together as we go through this. So what does it look like at the end of this decade if we try to take a look ahead at 2030? Several things have changed pretty significantly. If you think about weather and climate impacts, we're now looking at a scenario where 1 in 100-year events are going to occur 1 in every 10 years. Jay Oliver showed some great substation pictures from some hurricanes today. Those are becoming more frequent, as are wildfires, and they're big challenges for all of us in the utility industry. Second is electric transportation. I'll talk about this a bit more, but we have a mandate now to have 50% of new electric vehicles on the road by 2030. That is an incredible increase from where we are today. To reach that, we have to have a growth rate of 40% per year, every year, between now and 2030. That is an incredible growth rate and an incredible adoption rate by customers that aren't used to moving that quickly. But all of these things fit into us having a future that is very much decarbonized from where we are today. Renewables, a lot of discussion about renewables. We see at least a threefold increase in renewables by the end of the decade. Whether they're distributed or bulk, they're going to be kind of omnipresent. But as Jay pointed out, there's some operational issues that go with that we have to be able to balance out to provide reliable and resilient service to our customers. We're also going to see a real big need in cybersecurity. We've made a lot of advances in cybersecurity over the last decade. We need a lot more. With the digital transformation that's coming, it's going to be even more challenging. That's a huge, huge opportunity and challenge for us going forward. And while we are accelerating to net zero over the next 10 years and doing pretty well at it, what we're going to find is that most countries will miss those interim targets. Eric talked about that a bit this morning and how difficult it's going to be to reach those targets. Whether it's 2035, 2050 is not a light lift. It is a long haul to get to 2050 and net zero in 2050. The first 80% of the decarbonization looks relatively easy compared to the last 20%. So that's where our real challenges are. So how do we get there? We've got to change our thinking and our approach in a lot of ways. So I'd like for you to just imagine with me for a minute if in the future, in 2030, that every customer-owned appliance shows up at their home grid connected. Not just grid enabled like they are today, but grid connected by you making partnerships with appliance dealers, with manufacturers, so that when those new devices show up, they're already connected, you can control them. Second is, how about those EV chargers that are going to be coming around to everybody's home in some manner or form, and the big networks across the country to support that How about if they are controllable right out of the box? That's going to take some work. The folks who manufacture those charging mechanisms have some proprietary things there. They want to control those. There's a lot of work to be done in that space in the future. And also, what if every new water heater and air conditioning system that was put in place automatically became part of the local demand management program? If you put all those things together in a typical home, that's 2 to 11 kW of controllable load for a utility. That provides a tremendous opportunity for a flexible grid resource. However, there's a couple other things that have to go with this. If we get all these things connected, we have the ability to control them. We still need some additional work in that space. Number one, we need some standardized communications and controls across the industry. We also need some standardized protocols and processes for managing customer data and personal information. And third and most important, we need transparent, readily available reporting and data provision to everybody who's involved, whether it's a participant, an aggregator, or the grid operator. Has to be transparent so that these things can take place. So this is kind of a micro look using one home as an example. What if we take that up a couple of steps and think a little bit bigger and think about shared energy resources, or something we've called for a while an integrated energy network. And we just take this up a few steps. Number one, think about a few things that could apply in some different technological areas. In municipal systems, let's work with municipal systems. Put some backup in terms of energy storage on all the traffic signals. Then if there's an outage, you at least still got traffic moving, commerce moving, goods moving, till the power can be restored. Residential can be taken up another notch. Let's put in some good energy storage in addition to those controllable loads that we were just talking about. Provide additional resilience, additional reliability, and also give a homeowner an opportunity to control their own destiny in the event of a long-term outage. Increased backup generation. There's a lot of backup generation out there today. Most of it's diesel-fired. There's a big move for more of that to go to natural gas. But a lot of what's out there today, even though it's at critical load facilities, it only carries a portion of the load. What you need to think about for the future is we've got to be able to carry the whole load, particularly when you're talking hospitals. Many of them are enabled for that today, but grocery stores. Jay was mentioning earlier some of the problems that you have when a hurricane. Can you get people to the hospital? Can you get them to work if you have an electric vehicle? Can you do that, period? Can you pump gas today if the power's out at the gas station? The answer to that is no. So we need to continue to plan for some of those types of contingencies. Distributed energy resources are going to continue to proliferate, particularly energy storage. That is a huge asset opportunity for both individuals, businesses, and utilities as well. There are ways to use storage and solar to help in parts of the system where we're weak or we're at the end of a long circuit and we need to add load. But it's also a great opportunity to improve the reliability and the resilience on individual circuits. And then when you piece all that together, and a lot of you are doing some work already with microgrids, great opportunity there, and what a great economic development tool as well. But the microgrid is a living, breathing system that has generation, it has storage, it has demand response within it, and it's all interconnected. And at times, that microgrid will give to the greater grid. At other times, it will take from the grid, and it also has the ability to island. Great opportunities there with all of these. The key in all of this is that these technologies are all controllable by the utility. The question is, how do we make it happen in a way that customers are willing to be a part of that and cede their control over to the utility? And there's a lot of ways to do that. Whether utilities own the asset or lease it to the customer or just pay the customer to control it. There's a lot of ways to put that in place. But getting the trust from the customer to be able to control those loads to the greater benefit is going to be a challenge. But it can be accomplished. In order to accomplish those types of capabilities, there's 5 major streams of innovation that we see needing to happen at EPRI. And I'm just going to talk about 3 of these very quickly. A little bit of discussion on regulatory early. We see that at kind of the top of the list of where there need to be some changes. Regulation today is kind of a standard practice that we've all been used to for a number of years. As we think about all the dynamic changes that are going to occur to the system and with technologies behind the meter, on the system, the regulatory process has got to change. We have to have new approaches. We have to consider new business models. We have to look at new cost-benefit methodologies. Traditional cost-benefit methodologies have been really about rate or cost impacts just to the customer. New opportunities are out there with something like the total value test or some other things that are under development, where it's not only a cost equation, but it also picks up the societal benefits that go with things like electric transportation, for example. So all of those things need to fit into that process. The most important thing as we make those changes in the regulatory process is speed. We have to find a new stop on the speedometer somewhere that's well above 50 miles an hour in terms of processing a rate case. We've got to get a lot better at that. We can't do test years and stretch these things out, or you won't be able to put the infrastructure in place that's required. Another key thing I mentioned on a moment ago was customer and customer engagement. Customers have to be a huge part of this. You can't do an economy-wide decarbonization without the customers being 100% committed to this. So what do customers care about? The 5 C's. How much does it cost? Am I going to be comfortable? Is it going to be convenient? Do I have a choice? Those things have to be met as we think about everything that we're doing with the customers, because if they're not with us, we're not going to be successful. The other point I'd make very quickly off of this slide is around partnerships, and that's something that's been mentioned by a number of people today. There is a commonality of endpoint between a lot of groups today that haven't necessarily been able to sit down across the table from each other for many years and have a really good civil conversation working towards a common goal. The changes that are coming around a net zero future give us an opportunity to do that. And let's talk about how we work with groups, both that have been allies and some that may have been adversarial in the past. But let's get around the table, figure out some ways that we can work together, whether that's tech companies, trade or labor groups, customer advocacy groups. There's a lot of opportunity for everybody to get together, because in the end, we're still going towards that decarbonized, equitable future and energy for everyone. So I'm going to switch speeds here for just a second and talk a little bit about electrification. 2 ways for electrification. And we all know this is a key part of where we're going for a decarbonized future. First, let's talk about direct electrification. And that's where we've got clean electrons coming out of the generating facilities, moving down the wires and going straight to an end use. Lots of work to be done there. We're going to talk a little bit about low carbon fuels and how they apply with this as well. But as we think about the clean electron hitting the wires, obviously a lot's gone on there in the past with solar and wind, and a lot of growth there. But there's also opportunity to further develop carbon capture, utilization, and storage, as well as do more with advanced nuclear. Great opportunities there to expand. There's another area too, though, with low carbon resources. They have a big play in the combustion turbine space. We got a couple of projects going on today where we're blending hydrogen up to 35% in 3 different facilities around the country in existing combustion turbines, and see how that works. Test drive it for a while. When you get to 2024, 2025, Mitsubishi has units that are part of a project that we're doing, and others that are going to be 100% hydrogen capable in 2024 or 2025. That's a game changer. That's a zero carbon impact. Now, there's a NOx issue with hydrogen that we've got to fix, but there's no carbon. So tremendous opportunities there to keep putting clean electrons on the system. Also, from those clean electrons, we can look at indirect electrification. And that's where we take those clean electrons and we use them to create alternative carriers or low carbon fuels, hydrogen, ammonia, synthetic fuels, and we put them to work in difficult to electrify end uses. For example, ammonia is a great option for seaborne shipping. It's very portable and workable in that situation. Maersk is doing a lot of work in that space out of Europe. Tremendous opportunity. Hydrogen, where we need high temperature heat sources for industrial applications like the manufacturing of steel or concrete or chemicals. Great opportunities there as well. Are there technical challenges to accomplish this? Absolutely. And some of this isn't going to happen overnight. One that's certainly important, and Eric mentioned this, hydrogen is not cheap to produce today. It's not overly expensive when you look at the way it's produced for the most part in steam methane reformation using natural gas. However, that is hugely carbon intensive. So we're not really gaining anything by creating a low carbon fuel when we're spilling a lot of carbon back into the atmosphere as a process. Electrolysis to break water molecules to harness hydrogen is an old technology. It's been around a while, but we've got a lot of work to do there from a cost and efficiency standpoint. To create a kilogram of hydrogen with electrolysis versus with SMR is 3 times the cost. So there's a lot to be done there. Carbon free is not free, and we've got to figure out how to make these things more cost effective and efficient overall. The second big piece is how do we ultimately get these alternate energy carriers to the end use? We got a fabulous gas pipeline system in the United States. We're going to be doing some work through our low carbon resources initiative to test blending in that system. Hydrogen can be pretty brutal on metals. So we've got to try some blends, move it around the country, see what happens to those pipelines, how they can survive, and what happens when it comes out on the other end in an end use, how much can we blend? And what are we going to do if we need to get 100% hydrogen to a point? So there's a lot of opportunity here in the power to gas, gas to power. And as Eric mentioned, there's work to be done there because there's efficiencies and cost reductions to be gained. But we've got time to get there. We don't need it right this minute. And over the next 20 years, we can get to where we need to be in that space. So there are challenges in that, but I will tell you, I think the one big challenge that remains with all of this still lies with our customers. I keep coming back to that, and I think it's that critical because if they are not accepting of the changes and the opportunities that we put in front of them in terms of technology, they're not willing to try it out, and they are not willing to adopt it at a fast enough rate, it makes hitting those targets, whether they're interim at 2030, 2040, or the end game of net zero at 2050, it's very difficult to get there if they don't help us out. So there's going to have to be a lot of work in that space, and we're going to have to do a lot with customer education to get them on board with that because I mentioned the electric vehicle conundrum earlier about getting that many cars on the road and how much of a change in growth that is. It's the same thing with all these end-use technologies. We're going to ask customers to adopt new technologies and put them in place at a rate that we have never asked before. And that's going to be a challenge on individual companies as well as ultimately the consumers. One more piece I want to touch on very briefly, and you heard this talked about a bit this morning. We still have to work on climate adaptation going forward and how that impacts resilience. We've got to find some better, more common frameworks in how we model climate impacts and then what we do with them. We have to assess what the climate extreme weather impacts are on supply and demand. Then what are the impacts? What are the vulnerabilities on our system in generation, transmission, distribution, and how do we mitigate those risks? And when we develop the resilience plan, that's all well and good. We can say what our needs are. We can figure out what we need to invest, but then we have to do the right benefit cost methodologies once again and figure out how we're going to pay for it. The benefits are pretty straightforward. Everybody's going to get a piece of that. But the real question is, how does it all get paid for? And it's a bit like the chicken and egg thing with infrastructure for electric vehicles, same kind of thing on resilience. The more you build up the system, you may not need it immediately, but you certainly want it when that 1 in 1,000 year event shows up. You can't plan for all of those, but You need to be ready for that. Beyond, Jay mentioned the N-1 this morning. This gets a little beyond that. But we've got to be ready, be able to make those investments, and be able to cover the cost for those as well. The last thing I want to mention that ties all of these pieces together is thinking about an equitable and just transition around the energy space going forward. We're at a really unique time where the focus of the energy industry and societal interest are on a path to intersect. And it's a great opportunity for utilities to engage with businesses, with individuals, with communities, and move things forward so that we make access much easier for all customers. We make it more affordable for more customers, and we're able to provide a clean environment standard for everybody that's a consumer of electric energy. So if you think about all these things, it's really exciting looking ahead to be in this space. A couple things you can count on for sure. One, the utilization and the reliance on electricity is only going to continue to grow. It's a great opportunity for us, but there's a lot of challenges associated with that. And I can tell you, as our first panel this morning was comparing how many decades they knew each other. I've got some decades of gray hair here. I think the next 2 decades will be really exciting, but I can promise you that second decade, I'm going to be sitting on the sideline watching, playing a lot of golf. So with that, again, thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Do we have time for a few questions, Richie?
You'll take them?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Mark.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. Hi, Mark Gabriel with United Power, former EPRI, and a lot of other great things. Two related questions. On the one slide, you showed the control center. Isn't that really a proxy for a DSO or distribution system operator? And then related to that, doesn't this really require some fundamental business changes in how the business operates? We always talk about going from one way to two way, but now we're really talking about from one way to multiple thousands of ways. And so how do you see that evolving?
You've changed your perspective after WAPA, haven't you, Mark? A great question, and you're right on point. It is about a DSO. It's a huge chunk of that. A lot of that's work that gets done in Justin's area, but it's also about DERMS and the Distributed Energy Resource Management Systems. Huge challenge, because if you think about it today, if folks put in solar today, they may put in wind, they put in storage, whomever you're buying that from has their own version of DERMS. I mean, DERMS is nothing but software, but it's the ability to aggregate all those resources and control them at the distribution level. To your point, a control room situation. That's an enormous amount of data to process and control to make the things we're talking about here in a shared energy system come together. So we've got a lot of work to do in that space, at least in the next decade. Yes, sir.
Sign us up.
Sign you up? I'm always happy to sign you up, Mark.
Good afternoon. Carrick Johnson with Vermont Electric Power Company. We're a transmission-only company owned by 17 distribution utilities and a public benefits corporation. We've been a grateful partner of some work with EPRI, and I love your vision you laid out, but I'd be even more grateful for if you could answer a specific question. What specific role do you see EPRI doing to contribute in advancing what we all seek to accomplish, please?
I can tell you're friends with Pam. So Carrick used to work with our chief financial officer, Pam Keefe. We were talking about her earlier. She's a wonderful lady. That's a great question. And EPRI plays in a lot of this space, but there's going to be some space we don't. Give you an example where we're sort of in, one foot out. And the regulatory changes that we're talking about, we will be doing work around cost benefit methodologies and capabilities. We're not going to be the ones that go testify in rate cases. We're not going to be the ones that go advocate at the legislative meetings or anything like that. We're going to provide those tools to your leg people to folks like the Association for Transportation Electrification so that they can go perform that role. So that's one avenue. But as far as the technology development, a lot of what we do, Carrick, is we're a technology accelerator. We're not starting at technology readiness level 1, 2, or 3. We're more up in 4, 5, 6, and trying to get it up to commercialization. So a lot of what we bring is the ability to put things in the field, really put it through the loops, have our utility members apply it and try to break it, and see what we can do with it going forward. So that's a big part of our role. Larry.
Thank you, David. And don't want to let you off the hook, but Larry Beckett, Portland General Electric. Following on with Carrick's, maybe EPRI is the technology leader kind of for the industry. I mean, that's what you're recognized at, and from a national perspective. Something that you mentioned is how do we communicate with our customers? And by far, when we talk about all these parts and pieces, it's very complex. But is there a way that EPRI can help in, I hate to say cartoons, but is there a way that we can simplify to get the right messages out to all of our customers across the nation? And it would be great if it were coming from a technology leader for the nation.
That's a great idea, Larry. We do have one program that's in my area on customer behavior. And perhaps we could extend on that, but I think that's a great idea because there's a huge gap in the general public's perception of what it takes to get to a zero carbon future. And so we've heard some comments about 100% renewable. Yeah, that works, right? Synthetic inertia will take care of all of our problems. So that's a great idea that I'm going to take back because we certainly have the information and the scientific facts to go along with supporting that. Great idea. Thank you.
I think we'll wrap with one maybe question, but I'll give you the opportunity. You've had 2 questions fired at you, but maybe you can fire one back here. So maybe to wrap here, it's we've heard how can EPRI help industry, but what do you want to tell everyone here? Your pitch in 2022 as strategic teams meet together, and that's who's in the room here. What do you expect from industry to support your goals as you go back with your team?
Great question, Richie. I think for us, we could use help from everyone in this room with the infrastructure bill that's coming out. That's going to push a ton of money into the market to put technology in the field, and we're going to be in the middle of that. I spend a lot of time working with Michael Berube at Department of Energy. He's highly focused on the transportation infrastructure and rollout, and that's just one piece of it. We need your support as utilities being ready to do a couple of things. One, participate in projects as those opportunities come up. A lot of the money that's coming out of these bills, whether it's the infrastructure bill or the other, is going to come through the states. So it gives you a unique opportunity to have an avenue to that. We would love to work with you and partner on putting together some opportunities to advance some of the technology applications that we talked about and really put them in place. And to your point, Larry, the more we can get in the field and demonstrate to customers, put some testimonials together on that, the better off we are. So I would encourage you, as you see and think of project opportunities, please reach out to us. We'll work with you. We'll work with the state organizations, whether it's a state energy office, whomever. DOE, we work with the national labs. A number of you work with the national labs too. We're open to partnerships and collaboration together that help us all move the agenda forward. Okay, thank you.